I often receive questions that sound something like this. I tried to tell my friends, coworkers, parents, pastor, spouse about the New World Order, and they think I'm totally crazy. What should I do? There are a lot of things to say about this, and several ways that I could answer this question. I'll start by addressing the people who are brand new to the idea of the New World Order, as they are most often the people who ask this type of question. I would want you to know that you're in a kind of phase that lasts about 1 or 2 years that just about everyone who has ever fallen down the rabbit hole of conspiracy information goes through. I think it should have a clinical name like short-term New World Order freakout syndrome or something like that. In reality, this quote-unquote syndrome is actually less about the New World Order and more about human psychology. You've just found out that most of what you thought you knew about the world isn't true at all. That can be traumatizing, especially for people who put a lot of stock into what they know about the world. Most males fall into this category. That is, we really like to be able to explain how the world works to people. It's just how we are. But it's certainly not limited to males. When you fall down the rabbit hole, it's like you've had your mind washed. Everything that you thought you knew has been swept away, and you begin this mad dash to try to rebuild your knowledge about the world. And all of what you're finding out about this world in that search seems to suggest an epicness of great proportions. And it is epic. But I promise you, once you have enough information to be able to tell the truths from the half-truths and the outright lies that are out there, everything will get a bit easier to parse. I mean, at this point in a person's rebuilding process, they can give about as much weight to the idea that fluoride or vaccines are bad, something that I believe is on the true side, as they do that reptilians created the moon and Planet X will crash into the Earth next week, or that the mark of the beast is attained by listening to Beyonce. You need to understand that you are a sitting duck for all kinds of wrong stuff at this early stage because you have been mentally traumatized. And you're staying up nights sweating as you're trying to determine what's true and what's not, trying to rebuild your worldview. First, I'd like to say to you that this is normal, and that you will get through it, and that you should continue to try to figure out what's going on with the world and rebuilding your paradigm, but try to do it from good sources. I know that's next to impossible right now because you're not even sure what criteria to look for in a good source yet. But if you're a Christian and you know the Word of God, rely on God's gift of discernment. Look for the fruits of a teacher. Are they bearing good fruit or bad fruit? But you should be rebuilding your paradigm with the goal of doing the job relatively quickly and getting to a point where you are stable and productive and not scaring the crap out of all the people that love you. Because here's the thing. You do sound crazy to them when you are experiencing short-term New World Order freakout syndrome. You're super intense. It's all that you want to talk about. And this is probably true even if you're only interested in the somewhat normal topics like financial stuff or 9/11. But it's even more true if you're more interested in the 101 flavors of fringe stuff. Imagine if an extremely intense person was trying to tell you that HAARP caused a recent hurricane and that the Nephilim spaceships had something to do with it, meanwhile the Pope is drinking blood with Obama and Britney Spears. But let's assume for the sake of argument that everything that you're super excited about is true and important for them to know. After all, I know that a lot of the fringe stuff can be true too, or at least parts of it. You have to realize that it's too much for some people to take in, and that there are all kinds of reasons for this, which we'll talk about later. But don't take it personally. It's just too much for some people to take. You basically have to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. You know the person you're trying to convince, right? And if they're being resistant, despite your tireless efforts, just let it be. For some people, all you're going to do is burn the bridge of the relationship even more. If they're going to find out about what you want them to know, they will need to do it on their own. Some people won't learn this from you and need to figure it out for themselves. You planted a seed, trust me. They took it into consideration somewhere in there, and if they see something on their own that confirms it, they'll believe you down the road. I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, I always thought you were crazy back then, but since then I'm starting to think you were right about so-and-so all along. But continuing to hammer them with it is only going to be bad for your relationship at that particular point. It's like when someone is involved in one of those multi-level marketing things, and you know all they ever want to talk about is getting you to buy into it. You eventually don't want to hang around with that person anymore. So I'm suggesting in those cases, let them breathe a bit. I assure you that that person's relationship means more than having them know that the Federal Reserve is bad. If they see that you're going back to being a normal person in your interactions with them again, not freaking out anymore, they're going to be far more inclined to believe it. Have a normal conversation with them. Find out what's going on with their life. This is especially true for wives of people who are hopelessly falling down the rabbit hole. Please hear this, men. 9 times out of 10, your wife or girlfriend is not wired for this stuff. She doesn't have the same drive to know about how the world works. She is concerned with her family and security and raising up good children, and having a freaking out husband that may or may not be crazy is about the worst thing that could be happening to her. It's messing with all those things that she is concerned about, and it's a very scary time for her. I have heard the same story over and over. This causes all kinds of extreme marital strain and can and does lead to divorces. Let your wife be your wife. If she's expressed to you that she's not cool with hearing about all this stuff, or even if she hasn't but you know that she isn't and that she's very concerned about you, then please find another sounding board for what you heard on YouTube that night. Let her know that you're going to try to pull it all together and try to put the information that you've been learning in the correct file and not let it affect your life in any meaningful way. Comfort her. Take her out to dinner. Talk about normal things. Also, try to avoid making rash decisions regarding your family at this point. Like, for example, okay, everyone, let's gather around. There are some new rules that we have to follow. Number 1, the only thing that we're ever going to eat ever again is non-GMO flaxseed oil. We're all going to start keeping the Sabbath and the Feast of Trumpets. And by the way, we're moving to Mexico and burning our Social Security cards. And everyone needs to put this chunk of Oregon in the room to ward off ELF waves. If you're new to this, I guarantee that you have a lot of stuff that you just learned that you think is totally true that isn't. I'm speaking from experience here. I'm trying to save you the trouble that I went through and the strain that I put on people that I loved during those first few years of waking up. Yes, there are good and prudent things to do and teach your family about regarding the stuff that you're learning, and we'll get to that later. But for now, I'm just saying that I guarantee a sizable percentage of the stuff that you're freaking out about right now is totally wrong. This isn't your fault. This is just the nature of the truth information on the internet. Often the same people who are giving the kind of information that you initially were looking for and that is totally true tell you other stuff that sounds just as true but isn't. And because the other stuff was so true, you decided that there was no point in looking into the new stuff to see if it really was true. Besides, they're charismatic and have fancy graphs, and after all, they know about the New World Order, so everything that they're saying must be true, right? I'll sum up this section about short-term New World Order freakout syndrome with some helpful tips. Number 1, play it cool. It's not all going to go down tomorrow. You have some time to make sure that you know what you're talking about. Number 2, be grounded in the Word of God. We'll talk more about this later, but be reading the Bible, or at least be listening to good preaching, not conspiracy Christian teaching on the Bible. That can go a lot of wrong ways, but just good preaching or Bible teaching. I promise you that if you're getting a daily dose of sound doctrine, it will protect you from 99% of the crazy theories out there. Reading the New Testament without any filter is a spiritual thing. As you're reading it, God will kind of download peace and wisdom to you that you're going to desperately need if you're planning on navigating through the muddy waters of the Christian conspiracy movement. Number 3, take each situation on a case-by-case basis. If someone can't hear it, and they've made it clear that they don't want to hear it, let them be. However, if you're in a conversation with someone and they mention that they're going to take some crazy vaccine or something, let them know what you know about it. If they hear it, fine. But if they're mad about it, don't take it personally. Just move on. All you can do is try.